Right, let's turn to the war in Ukraine right now. And while there is intense fighting along the front line in the Donbas region, joining us is the Defence and Security Analyst, Professor Michael Clarke. Good to see you, Michael. Thank you for coming in. So why is this so intense right now?
In the Donbas, it's intense because this is strategically now quite important. The liberation of Kherson a couple of weeks ago was the biggest setback that the Russians had down in the southwest. But now the attention turns up to the northeast because this area from Svatove to Kreminna that we've been talking about for a little while, this main artery, the P66 highway, is really important to Russian supplies further south. And Kreminna in particular is the sort of hinge. If the Ukrainians take Kreminna, and they've been attacking it very intensively now for some time, then they can hinge round from Luhansk into northern Donetsk. They can begin a big sort of left hook, which will really upset Russian plans. And the Russians know that, and they've dug in ferociously at both Svatove and Kreminna. If they lose that line, the Russians would have to go back to Starobilsk, which is about 35 miles further east, and that will really complicate them, really put them almost back on where they started in February. So that's why it's so important, because Kreminna is the key now to opening up, or failing to open up, the rest of the Luhansk region and move into the Donbas for the Ukrainians. And they seem determined to try to get Kreminna in the next couple of weeks. We'll see.
What's all this about Russia launching cruise missiles stripped of their nuclear warheads? Sounds quite incredible.
Yes, the Ministry of Defence have confirmed on the basis of what they've seen on the ground that this is NATO knows this is the Blackjack bomber. And the Blackjacks carry this Kh-55 air-launched cruise missile, which is a nuclear missile. The Russians look as if they've taken the warheads off them, that they are using these cruise missiles now without a warhead, just with ballast where the warhead would be, because they have to put something in the space to keep the balance of the missile as it is. And they're using them, so it's inert. It has no explosives, it's just a missile. And they're using them, apparently, almost certainly, as a decoy. Now, that tells us quite a lot. First of all, these are Russia's nuclear forces. These are central, and Putin has, of all the things he's modernised, he's kept the nuclear forces up to date. So they're taking missiles out of the most central thing in Putin's mind, nuclear missiles. They're using them as decoys, as a drone decoy. So they're not even using them for explosive purposes. They're using them as decoys, which shows us two things. One is that the Russians really are running short of missiles that they can use. And two, that Ukrainian air defences must be pretty good, because they're having higher levels of success, because the Russians now need to decoy those missiles. So sending a big cruise missile, it might be a 1980s cruise missile. It was designed first came into service in the 80s. But it's a big and powerful missile. And having to use them as decoys now shows that the Ukrainian air defence has really got the Russians worried.
Goodness, right. Winter's drawing in. We know that Ukrainians are suffering now lack of heat, water, electricity. But with the conditions changing, how will that affect the fighting?
Yeah, these are some images. That image on the right is from the Somme in 1916. Many people will be familiar with that. That image from the left is Bakhmut last week. And that's the Ukrainian Ministry of Defence put that out amongst another number of images as Bakhmut. Shows you quite a lot of things, tremendous similarity. Trenches don't change very much from one era to the next. You know, trenches are trenches.
The trenches,
and they're full of water and so on. And there's a lot of broken trees, and that's a sign of artillery fire, of course. All the trees are nothing but stumps. We saw that in the First World War. We see it around Bakhmut now. There's no tree above about 4 feet high, because they've just gone. The artillery's taken them all away. And the point is that, winter for the civilians in Ukraine started a couple of weeks ago, in the sense that the Russians have been attacking the electricity. Winter for the troops on the ground starts this week, because the weather is changing now. In the next few days, between now and the weekend, it is expected to be below zero for consistently now, 3 or 4 degrees below zero from now to the weekend. And that will freeze the ground. 3 or 4 days of consistent sub-zero temperatures means the ground is frozen. And that ground will stay in a normal winter somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees below. If there is an anticyclone in Siberia, which doesn't happen every year, but it does happen, then it'll go to 20 below or more. And that will be life-threatening. And the point is that in that case, people in the trenches, some of them will just freeze to death. And the difference will favour the Ukrainians, because they've got better equipment, they're better organised, they've got better logistics, they get better food. All of the problems that the Russians have will be magnified if they get stuck in a really harsh winter. And every infantryman, you can see there from the picture on the left, every good infantryman knows how to look after their feet. Because looking after your feet in the infantry is fundamental to what you do. Trench foot is it becomes a big problem. There are some cases of that already, trench foot. So they know how to look after themselves. And so in a way, the winter war for the troops is beginning this week. And we'll see how each side copes with it.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Michael.